Hey everybody, it's Seth LaPlante, and I wanted to investigate the Second Amendment and schools. And so, does the Second Amendment stop at the schoolhouse gate? And we had learned in Tinker versus Des Moines that other constitutional rights, such as due process and the freedom of speech, do not stop at the schoolhouse gate. So, what about the Second Amendment? So far in 2018, 32 people have been killed in K-12 schools, on school grounds, anyways, and many are fighting to increase gun protection in schools, while others are fighting against gun rights to reduce violence. And I wanted to know the current gun laws involving schools and whether or not people in schools have Second Amendment rights. The Second Amendment of the Constitution states that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment is not limitless, though. The federal government can control the types of weapons the public can have and what members of the public are deemed safe enough to have firearms. It is also not limited to militia. In the District of Columbia versus Heller, the Supreme Court determined the Second Amendment applies to individuals for traditional uses such as home protection. Heller was allowed to have a pistol within D.C. for home protection, even though the law in D.C. stated otherwise. In 1990, Congress signed into act the Gun-Free School Zones Act. It prohibited any unauthorized individual from knowingly possessing a loaded or unsecured firearm at a place that the individual knows or has reasonable cause to believe is a school zone. It was signed as a part of a larger crime control act by George H.W. Bush. Federal law defines a firearm basically as any weapon designed to shoot a projectile using an explosive or any part of a weapon that is designed to do that. It also includes any destructive device such as bombs and whatnot. A school zone is the area surrounding a school 1,000 feet around school grounds. That's the school campus, not the school building. That includes public, parochial, and private schools. Now, for the Gun-Free School Zone Act, it does not include private property within 1,000 feet of a school. So, on private property, you are allowed to have a gun. You also are allowed to have a gun by federal law when it's locked and unloaded in a vehicle on school grounds, or when it's approved by the school or by licensed carriers of the state. The federal law does not allow firearms in a school zone when it's on public land. That includes houses and roadways. So public housing within 1,000 feet of a school, those people cannot keep their firearms in their house. And also, as you drive by a school, you're not allowed to have a gun in the car unless it's unless it's locked and unloaded. As you can see, if you were to try to drive through the Los Angeles area, all those red dots on the right, it would be very difficult to know where all of those schools were and not break a federal crime. So it would be best to lock your gun in the car in a locked area and have it unloaded. Or if you do not have a state license to do so, carry a firearm, then obviously you're not allowed to bring a firearm onto school grounds. Punishment for breaking the Federal Gun-Free School Zone Act is a misdemeanor, but it's up to 5 years in prison and up to $5,000 in fine and possible loss of privilege to possess firearms. In 1995, the School Zone Act deemed unconstitutional in United States versus Lopez. It was a close decision, a 5-4 decision. It was deemed unconstitutional for Congress to make the law. They didn't have jurisdiction because it did not impact interstate commerce. So Congress rewrote the act and made it unlawful for anyone to carry a firearm that does impact interstate commerce. And so that's basically all firearms. Because different parts are made in different parts of the country, and so the firearms all impact interstate commerce. Now, technically, if you had a gun that was forged in Maine, manufactured in Maine, and then bought and sold in Maine, you would not be breaking federal law to bring that onto a school zone. In 1994, Congress passed the Gun-Free Schools Act, which mandates expulsion for at least a year for a student who brings a firearm onto campus. If not, schools will not receive federal funding. It does allow for administrator discretion. So if my son was in the car and we drove past the school and he had a gun next to them, then the administrator would not necessarily have to expel them. The police must be informed, and students with a disability still have all their due process rights as well as everybody else, and would be allowed services during an expulsion. So the reality of the situation is that 18 states allow adults to carry firearms with the school's approval. And 15 of those states actually have armed staff members, other than school resource officers, on campus. Some other states allow members of the public to carry firearms on campus or on school grounds with prior approval or with a concealed carry permit. In Maine, a person may not possess a firearm on public or private school property or within 500 feet of public or private school property, or discharge a firearm within public or private school property. Maine law differs from the federal law. It doesn't exclude private property within 500 feet. It doesn't allow for license holders to carry in school zones, and it doesn't allow for firearms to be locked in vehicles. A few caveats or exceptions to Maine's law is that they can be used for school board approved education. You can have hunter safety courses on campus. You can have other firearms education on campus. It can also be used as school-owned gun ranges if the school board approves. And it also, unloaded guns can be kept in a locked vehicle while at a hunter's breakfast outside of school hours. And so if you were convicted in Maine for having a gun on school grounds, then it's a Class E misdemeanor. It's punishable up to 6 months in jail and also a $1,000 fine. Now, you don't actually get 6 months in jail or a $1,000 fine, as a recent case in Rockport states or shows. In 2016, Megan Collier was an ed tech, and she forgot she had a pistol in her lunch bag, and it was discovered by another staff member when it fell out of the fridge and fell onto the floor. She resigned and pled guilty. She received a sentence of 50 hours of community service and a year of supervision, which cost her $10 a month. And at the end of the year, the charges will be dismissed if she doesn't have any other infractions. If she doesn't comply and she has other infractions, then she gets a $200 fine, far from a $1,000 fine and 6 months in jail. The Maine legislature doesn't want to expand Second Amendment rights to include school. And so on March 20th this year, the House unanimously decided not to allow firearms in cars on school grounds in Maine. This bill was aimed at allowing hunters to drop off their children with a firearm in the car. Now, this decision or this vote was shortly after Parkland, and they did not feel it was the right time to enact a law allowing more guns on campus. Who knows what would happen if it went up again this year. So, do teachers actually want to be armed to help protect their schools? And according to this Gallup poll, which was shortly after Parkland as well, 497 teachers were asked, and 73% said that they oppose staff members carrying weapons. 58% said they would not feel safer with guns on school or would feel less safe. And 18% said they would be willing to carry a gun in school. So 1 in 5 teachers would carry a gun in school. And would that 1 in 5 make a difference? This man, Aaron Feiss, was at Parkland, a teacher at Parkland, where he was a coach and a school security guard. And he acted as a human shield for some of the Parkland students. Had he been armed, would have something else happened. So shortly after Parkland, a new law in Florida was enacted that would allow trained members of staff to carry firearms. So, do people shed their Second Amendment rights behind the schoolhouse gate? And currently, that depends on which state a person lives in. 30 states allow licensed individuals to legally carry on school grounds. Most of those places require school board approval. In Maine, people do shed their Second Amendment right at the schoolhouse gate and within 1,000 feet of the schoolhouse grounds, or within 500 feet if you're going by state law. Yesterday, a decision by the Ninth District Court could impact Second Amendment rights as we go further. They upheld the right of a person to carry for personal protection despite state laws. And so this case will create precedents for the right of an individual to carry in public for self-protection. And could that possibly then be transferred over to self-protection on school grounds? And so I believe that it is possible for the court to make a decision that would allow Second Amendment rights to include schools nationwide. And basically what that would take probably is for, at a public event, a person bringing their gun onto a public event at a school and then defending their right to be protected on school grounds. So my final thoughts is, well, I wouldn't relish the idea of carrying while teaching. I would like to have a secured biometric safe in my classroom or in other classrooms to grant those who want to the ability to protect students in the case of a school shooting. I would also like to see Maine follow the federal law that allows firearms in locked cars on school grounds. Basically, this is a greedy reason because I just want to be able to hunt before or after work. Currently, I also live surrounded by schools, and every time I leave with a firearm in the car, I commit a federal and state firearms infraction. Countless people in Maine commit these infractions during hunting season and all throughout the year while driving by schools. While good intention, the current gun zone law is not practical. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any other questions, my email is slaplante@dishs.org. Drop me a line. All right, thank you.